Infant and toddler language development. Human beings are not born talking. We learn to understand language and to speak during the first years of our lives. The development of a child's speech is a very important developmental stage which starts in utero and carries out throughout their lifespan. At around 6 to 7 months, the human fetal auditory system appears to be relatively mature and able to hear their mother's voice. There is also considerable evidence that the late-term human fetus is responsive to externally presented sounds, such as clicks and paired tones. Within a few days after birth, a child is able to learn to communicate with their caregiver. For example, when they cry, they know that their caregiver will tend to them. There are many theories that have attempted to account for how children acquire language. A few of these theories that I felt were important or stood out were the innate hypothesis, which believed or stated humans are genetically predisposed to acquire and use language. This theory claims that babies are born with the knowledge that language have patterns and with the ability to seek out and identify those patterns. The imitation theory claims that children learn language by listening to the speech around them and reproduce what they hear. According to this theory, language acquisition consists of memorizing the words and sentences of some language. As for the imitation theory, I feel it holds true for children who are learning a second language as well as English. For example, in the Navajo language, I constantly see children repeating what they hear an adult say. So, as the theory states, children learn language by listening to the speech around them and reproducing what they hear. So, whenever we are speaking around young children, we have to be really cautious of how we produce the language because their reproduction depends on how they hear what we say. With the Navajo language as well, if a word isn't said right, then it could have a total different meaning than what you really intended to say in the first place. That is why we have to be really cautious about how we produce our language or speak to our children as well, so that we make sure that they are able to acquire the language more properly. And last, also the reinforcement theory asserts that children learn to speak like adults because they are praised, rewarded, or otherwise reinforced when they use the right forms and are corrected when they use wrong forms. And last but not least, the social interaction theory, which is really popular and well known with a lot of child development majors. This theory assumes that children acquire language through social interaction with older children and adults in particular. I feel another theory that holds true for a child who's trying to learn either English or any other language. They will learn what they hear from others. As they say, children easily pick up what you say, so you have to be cautious about what you say around kids. Language production also occurs in different stages. So it goes from reflexive crying to cooing, which starts around 1 month, to babbling around 6 months. And babbling's whenever like da 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 or ma ma ma. And whenever children babble, parents interpret it as the child saying dada or mama. Linguists assume that babies babble to practice the muscle coordination needed to produce language. Through a child's language development, they are prone to make mistakes. Babies are passionate, as well as infants and toddlers are passionate to communicate, as well as adults are passionate to help babies learn and talk. And they do this by trying to correct the child's mistakes. But we need to understand that all children, regardless of what language they're acquiring, make mistakes, and it's okay. When children hear a word for the first time, they don't know what makes the use of the word appropriate. But through trial and error, they are able to correct themselves. So when a child hears a word for the first time, as I mentioned, they don't know what makes the use of the word appropriate. They go through some stages known as complexive concepts, overextensions, or underextensions. And just Just real quickly, complexive concepts is when a child associates different characteristics with the meaning of a word on successive uses, thereby creating a set of objects that do not have any particular unifying characteristics. Overextension is when a child extends the range of a word's meaning beyond that typically used by adults. We say that he has produced an overextension. An underextension is the application of a word to a smaller set of objects than is appropriate for mature adult speech. Careful study reveals that although less commonly noticed than overextensions, underextensions are at least equally frequent in the language of children. Children also go through a stage known as the one-word stage, which when they are producing single words in isolation. They typically name people, objects, pets, and other familiar and important parts of his or her environment. For example, it could be no, gimme, and mine. Between approximately 18 and 24 months of age, children begin to use two-word utterances. At first, the utterances may seem to be simply two one-word sentences produced one right after another. There may be a pause between them, and each word may be separate from the other. Later in development, three-word utterances are initially formed by combining or expanding two-word utterances. Two two-word strings with a common element may be combined. For example, daddy cookie and eat cookie may be combined to form daddy eat cookie. Also, because of omission of the function words, the speech of young children is often called telegraphic. When people talk to one another, their general goal is to get listeners to understand what they are saying. This goal applies just as much when listeners are young children as when they are adults. The problem is that young children know very little about the structure and function of the language adults use to communicate with each other. As a result, adult speakers often modify their speech to help children understand them. Speech directed at children is called infant-directed speech or child-directed speech. Through these styles of speech, adults have to gain the attention of children. And by doing this, they use attention getters, such as Sarah, there's a dog, by putting a lot of emphasis, using their name first, just a lot of excitement into how they are talking to a child, kind of like baby talk. And by taking turns when talking to a child, they're able to see the difference in communication and back to making corrections. When making corrections, the adult is more concerned about correcting the truth value of the utterances, but the adult also uses the correct form of the verb. So for example, child points and says doggy. Adult says, no, that's a horse. So we're more prone to correct the mistakes children make instead of just acknowledging the fact that they are forming some sort of vocabulary or language. Here I have included a child language development chart, which goes from 12 weeks to 12 months. And if you read through it, it'll just tell you what development stage the child is at that specific week. So as a parent, this is very beneficial to see if your child is on the developmental chart. If not, if the child is making progress or what you need to work on and where you need to get. They also have this as a general development chart for children. If you would like one, you could find it online. Another important aspect is bilingual language acquisition. This is what I'm trying to do with my children, is how to teach them to learn a second language. So being bilingual is any child who receives sufficient input from two languages. And Pearson suggests that a child will become competent speakers of a language only if at least 25% of their input is in that language. Therefore, it is beneficial to speak to your children while they are still young, and to start speaking to them in your own language while they're in utero, especially as a mother, since they are able to hear your voice at 32 weeks. Speaking to them, singing to them, whatever you're capable of in your own language is very beneficial and will help the child gain the knowledge, and it'll be easier for them to learn how to speak.